Hi everyone, I'm David Aragona, and this is the 2021 TimeformUS Road to the Kentucky Derby Series. The focus this week is Oaklawn Park, where they're going to run the first of their series of Derby preps, the Grade 3 Southwest Stakes. You probably know this race has been rescheduled a couple of times, intended to be run, I think 12 days ago at this point, but with all the weather and the unusual winter temperatures that were taking place in Hot Springs at this time of year, this race has been postponed a couple of times. It's going to finally be run this Saturday. A field of 7's been drawn. We'll take a look at all of them on this graphic here. And the morning line just came out. The number 1, Essential Quality, unsurprisingly, is the morning line favorite at 3-2, a slight favorite over the number 4, Jackie's Warrior, at 8-5. I would imagine these two will separate themselves in the wagering a bit more from the rest of the field, and perhaps Essential Quality will separate himself from Jackie's Warrior a little more. I would imagine that the 2-year-old champion from last year, Essential Quality, will be the heavy favorite in this race, probably odds on by post time. But there is some other nice horses in this race. The number 7 Spielberg has graded stakes credentials. Some others have come in out of allowance and maiden wins that have shown promise at times, but none of them have really run as fast as the 2 favorites on the morning line. There might be some weather for this weekend, not the kind of winter temperatures that we saw over the past few weeks, but there is some rain in the forecast ahead of Saturday at Oaklawn. So be aware that this race might be run over a wet track. I think it's unclear at this time. There's some rain predicted Friday, a lot more predicted on Saturday in the second half of the day. So we'll see how that all develops. But a lot of these horses don't have wet track form, so that could just throw a monkey wrench into things. Before we get to the contenders, let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this race. And not a big field and not much speed signed on, as you can see by this pace projector. The number 4, Jackie's Warrior, is shown on the lead, and really he's the only horse with front-running form in this race. The others are more stalker, mid-pack closer types. The only horse that's really done any meaningful running on the front end in the past is the number 2, Safa's Day, and no coincidence that he's also trained by Steve Asmussen, so I would find it hard to believe that he's going to apply much pressure to Jackie's Warrior coming out of that same barn. And the others are more stalker, mid-pack types. I don't think they're going to apply that much pressure. The number 1, Essential Quality, he's more of a stalk and closing type, so you'll imagine that he will come from the mid-pack position like he's shown in the pace projector, and I think it's just a matter of whether or not they can overcome the likely advantage that Jackie's Warrior is supposed to have on the front end. Let's move into the past performances of those 2 favorites, beginning with the number 1, Essential Quality. As I mentioned at the top, this was the 2-year-old champion from last year, winner of last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He's undefeated in 3 career starts. He's obviously done nothing wrong, and he's progressed with each career start, running subsequently faster numbers each time. Let's take a look at that most recent victory in the aforementioned Breeders' Cup Juvenile, where he beat today's main rival, Jackie's Warrior. You see Jackie's Warrior in that lime cap coming off the turn with the lead, but he's about to be inhaled by a couple of runners, including Essential Quality, who you see is that gray horse coming down the center of the track in those blue Godolphin silks. He runs by these leaders and goes on to a visually impressive 3/4 length victory, but it does have to be noted that he got a great trip in this race. He was back in mid-pack early. They were really moving on the front end. Jackie's Warrior was part of that pace, and you see those fractions color-coded in red and TimeformUS PPs, just speaking to the fact that the pace was quick and it kind of fell apart towards the end. We saw horses come from off the pace, including the 3rd-place finisher, Keep Me in Mind, who's not running here, but he's a horse that came from, I think, almost last place in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and got up for 3rd. So horses that were closing that day definitely had a bit of an advantage, but that said, Essential Quality has been progressing with each start. He arguably still has room for improvement in just his 4th career start. The real question is he set for his best effort coming off the layoff? Obviously, there are bigger goals down the line. This is just a prep race for what's to come, so we'll see if he's ready to come out with his A effort off the bench, but he's definitely a major player in this race. Moving on to his main rival, the number 4, Jackie's Warrior. As I said at the top, he is the likely speed in this race, and he's coming off that 4th-place finish in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, where we saw him fading at the end behind Essential Quality. That was not his best effort, because you see those early pace figures of 1:44 for the 1st and 2nd call in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile. That's extremely fast for a 1:16 race, and Jackie's Warrior just had little chance to hold on after being in the teeth of that fast pace. We've seen horses come back out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and do pretty well, including the 2nd-place finisher, Hot Rod Charlie, who came back with a very close 3rd-place finish in the Robert B. Lewis a couple weeks ago at Santa Anita, repeating his speed figure. So that seems like a live race. I mean, no surprise, it attracted the best 2-year-olds of last year. And Jackie's Warrior, he's got the prior form to back up the performance that day, actually having run even better in some prior starts. Let's take a look at his Champagne victory from last year, the race leading into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he just couldn't have been more impressive in this race. He was setting an honest pace up front, sustained a challenge from his main rival, Reinvestment Risk, at the top of the stretch, and he just easily turns that rival away. Joel Rosario sets him down, asks him for his best run, and he spurts away impressively in the final eighth mile of this race. He ran this race and finished off like a mile and a 16th. Today's distance is not supposed to be a problem. He didn't get it in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but as I said, the pace of that race might have prevented him from doing so. I think under ideal circumstances, Jackie's Warrior can get this distance. And I was talking about essential quality coming off the layoff. Well, Jackie's Warrior is coming off the same layoff, but I'm a little more encouraged with Jackie's Warrior because you see these stats for Steve Asmussen, very strong numbers with horses coming off layoffs of 75 to 150 days in graded stakes dirt routes. Over the past 5 years, out of 22 starters under these circumstances, he's had 9 winners. That's a 41% win rate with a $2.46 ROI. This is a screenshot from DRF Formulator. You can use this to look up a whole variety of stats, and you can sort these by horses that have won, look at the horses that have won in this sample, and you can see based on some recent performances, he's won with horses like this very recently, including Midnight Bourbon, the winner of the Lecomte, and Clairiere, who just a couple weeks ago won the Rachel Alexander at the Fairground. So Steve Asmussen can win with these types of horses and do so with 3-year-olds, and I think Jackie's Warrior, given his speed figures from last year and given the likely pace scenario of this race, is going to be pretty tough to beat, and I would give him the slight edge in this Southwest. There are some other horses to consider, though. A couple other contenders that I do want to touch upon, beginning with the number 7 Spielberg. He is the Bob Baffert invader in this race, and Bob Baffert does have a long-standing history of shipping into Oaklawn Park with success. I'll be a little surprised if he's the winner of this race, though, because I've just never been the biggest fan of Spielberg. He basically showed what he was early in the summer last year running at Del Mar, and he just hasn't really improved that much since then. We'll take a look at his final start of his 2-year-old season in the Los Alamitos Futurity. He gets the job done this day as the slight second choice, but he had to work pretty hard to run down a big long shot in this race, and it really took him the entire stretch to get up. His main rival, the favorite in this race, Red Flag, he just didn't show up at all, was not a factor, so this race became much easier for Spielberg to win, yet he still had to work hard to get by this long shot on the front end, and I was not thrilled with Spielberg's subsequent performance when he came back and was beaten over 10 lengths on the aforementioned Robert B. Lewis, finishing about 11 lengths behind Hot Rod Charlie, who ran so well in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and we saw essential quality and Jackie's Warrior hanging right with Hot Rod Charlie, and Spielberg was no match for him. So I just think Spielberg's a cut below some of the top 3-year-olds that are out there, so I'll be surprised if he is able to upset either of the 2 favorites. Looking for horses to use underneath, I'm actually a little bit more intrigued by a bigger long shot in this race. That's the number 6 Woodhouse. I'm not really talking about this horse as a win candidate, but if you're playing trifectas, I think this is a horse you might want to take a look at underneath. He's very lightly raced. He's only had 2 starts in his career. Looked pretty good despite being green first time out at Remington Park, winning that debut. And he came back last time out at Oaklawn Park in early February. Let's take a look at that race. It was a muddy track. He's one of the few horses in this race with experience over a wet track, so that's a feather in his cap, especially if the track does come up wet on Saturday. And while he only finished 3rd in this race, he's pretty green once again coming to the stretch. You're still going to see him swapping leads a few times out in the center of the track. He's going to be drifting out, drifting in, but nevertheless, he's finishing on pretty decently, and this was a nice non-winners of 1 allowance race. Some horses coming out of this, or coming into this, I should say, had shown some ability in prior starts, and he almost gets up. He's finishing well, best of all at the end, and I just think this son of Speightstown has some ability. This is asking a lot, just his 3rd career start, but he'd only have to really beat Spielberg to get into the trifecta here, so I think he could be one that you want to use underneath. But for me, I'm going pretty logical in this race. We'll throw up my picks, and I picked the number 4, Jackie's Warrior, on top, just going with that pace advantage. I was a big fan of this horse last year during his 2-year-old season. I really believe he didn't get his chance to put forth his best effort in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year, and I think he might have the edge over his main rival, Essential Quality, as they both come off the layoff in this Grade 3 Southwest on Saturday at Oaklawn Park.